Well, hello everybody, welcome to Coding 101, and in today's video I'm going to be touching on some of the most important concepts in JavaScript. Well, hello everybody, welcome to Coding 101, and in today's video I'm going to be touching on some of the most important concepts in JavaScript. These concepts that I'm going to explain today are one of the most fundamental concepts, and they are the bedrock of JavaScript. So you simply cannot do without knowing most of the concepts that I'm going to explain to you today. So the first thing that we're going to learn about is the DOM. You might have heard of this, the Document Object Model. So a proficient JavaScript developer must know how to interact with the DOM. That's the first thing that you need to do. DOM is a programming interface for HTML. It essentially gives developers license to make HTML changes without explicitly using HTML, but rather using JavaScript. So we have the option to create, change, and remove elements from an HTML document without the need to use HTML or any other language. So how this works is that the DOM looks at an HTML document and sees a tree of nodes. A node represents an HTML element. I think this would be much easier for me to explain if I just show it to you. So let me give you an example. Over here, we have an HTML document. So this HTML document has tags in it. You can see the tags. If you're familiar with HTML, you know some of the tags that we have here. We have the HTML tag, we have the head tag, we have the meta tag, we have the title tag, we have the h1 tag, we have the div tag, and we have the p tag. So what DOM does is that it looks at all these elements as a tree of nodes. And I'm going to show you a picture of how this is represented in the node. This picture right here. So you can see that what we have in there, let me just maximize it. So you can see that this is a representation of the HTML document that I just showed you. We have our head tag, we have our body tag, we have our meta tag, we have our title tag, we have our h1 tag, we have our div tag, and we have our p tag. So this is how the DOM views HTML, thereby giving the developer license actually to manipulate the DOM or manipulate the HTML in however way the developer might see fit. We have the ability to access each of these elements individually and manipulate them in however way we might see fit. So it's extremely important for you to learn the different ways to mess around with the DOM. There are many different functions that can be used to manipulate the DOM. So as a proficient JavaScript developer, it's very important for you to know these functions and know how the DOM actually works. If you're interested in me doing a JavaScript DOM tutorial, please leave a comment in the comment section, and I will see that a couple of people are interested and go on and do that video as well. So the other thing that you must know or learn as a proficient JavaScript developer is scope. Scope describes the context of your code. It determines the visibility and accessibility of your variables. So it is possible to create a variable and have that variable not accessible or usable in a certain part or aspect of your code. So it's very important to know where and when the objects that you create can be used. There are two types of scope. We have the global scope, which simply states that any variable that is declared outside of a function is global and can be used or manipulated by any function within that code. So let's give an example. Let's say, for example, you want to declare a variable and you want to name that variable name. This is going to be Coding 101. And we create a function that simply says hello. So this function that we have declared over here has the option to use this variable that we have declared over here, because this variable is global and can be used at any point within the code that we're going to create. So we can simply say return hello name. And if we were to console log the results of this function, say hello, you would notice this function has just used the variable that was declared at the very top. So this variable is global. But there's another type of scope which is called the local scope. So the local scope strictly declares that any variable that is declared within a function can only be accessed and used within that very function. So you cannot use that variable outside of that function. You can only use that variable within that very function that you've declared it in. So for example, we have our function over here. Now we want to take this variable that we declared outside the function and we want to move it to the inside of this function over here. And we want to try and console log that variable. We're going to just say console log that variable. So the logic of JavaScript states that this variable cannot be accessed outside of the function because it is within a local scope. So you cannot do this. This is not allowed. The variable that we have declared is only accessible within the function, so much so that if we were try to make the mistake that we're doing right now to access this variable outside of its boundary, we would get a reference error. So let's try and run this file. You can see that the name has not been defined. We just got a reference error because this function, we try to access it, but it's not accessible because it is not a global variable. So this is one of the most important things that you must know, one of the most simple things actually to learn as a JavaScript developer, to know the scope of whatever variable or object or even function that you might be defining. Well, as long as we're talking about scopes, the other thing that you absolutely must learn as a JavaScript developer are closures. So a closure is an inner function that is access to the outer function's variables. So there's a bit of a scope chain or scope level. This closure has three scope chains. It has its own scope, it has access to the outer function's variable, and it has access to the global variables. So in simple terms, if we were to create a function within a function, that function has three levels of scopes. It has its own local scope, it has the outer function scope, and it has the global scope. But how about we do less talking and more coding? So what we're going to do is that first we're going to modify our say hello function. So instead of declaring the name variable, we're going to create a function that's going to make a personal hello by calling us with our name and surname. So we're going to create two functions here. We're going to create an outer function and then we're going to create an inner function. So our outer function, we're just going to get rid of this. So our outer function is going to receive the person's name, and then our inner function is going to receive a person's surname or last name. So we're going to declare var, and we're going to, this is going to initialize to our inner function. And our inner function, like I said, is going to take our surname or last name, and then we're going to say hello. We're gonna combine these two arguments, the name and the last name. And then after that, we're going to return that function. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to return our function, which is hello. Get rid of this console log. So now how this is going to work, it's a bit of a chain and you need to follow it very carefully. Our function, what it's going to do, it's going to take an argument of name, then it's going to return a function which is called hello, and this function is the final end of our chain which returns our greeting. So what we're going to do is that we're going to first initialize that function that is going to be returned. So if we call say hello, what it simply does is return a function. And remember that function, all it does is take our coding is our first name. Forgot about that. And then remember, this is just a function that we've just initialized with this variable. This is a function, so we need to complete this function by calling it as well, and we need to feed it the surname, which is going to be 101. Let's console log this so that we're able to see it on our terminal. Save this, run our JavaScript file, and there you have it. So this is how closures are used in JavaScript, and this is something that is very important for you to learn as a beginner or as an advanced JavaScript, because there's some people who are pretty much advanced in their JavaScript and they have no idea what closures are, and probably may use them in some level of their coding or in some parts of their coding, but this is very, very important for you to learn as a JavaScript developer. So the other things that you need to learn as a proficient JavaScript developer is asynchronous JavaScript. And within asynchronous JavaScript, there's so many elements that you would need to learn. You're gonna have to learn a callback function, how to use it in code. You're gonna have to learn how to use promises and what promises are and how they're used in code as well. And you're gonna have to learn how to use async await. So, lucky for you, I have a complete video that outlines how all of these elements of asynchronous JavaScript are used in code. So I'm gonna leave a link for that video in the comment section, so you can check that out and you will not regret. So these are just some of the very, very crucial and fundamental concepts that you as a JavaScript developer, you must learn, you must know, and you must master these concepts. So thank you very much for watching this video. Please make sure that you subscribe. Please make sure that you leave a comment on the comment section. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer all those questions, and make sure that you like as well. And I will see you next time on Coding 101.